The Galactic Senate met inside a giant circular hall that floated above a calm blue world. It was the kind of place people imagined when they thought about diplomacy, order, and wisdom. Yet on this day, the hall felt strangely tense. Delegates from 100 different species filled the seats, their voices low, their eyes fixed on the center platform where the final decision would be announced. Earth's small group of human representatives walked in quietly. They looked tired, like people who had already argued every fact, shared every piece of evidence, and tried every peaceful step. Still, they stood tall. They had come with respect, believing the Senate would listen to reason, but the atmosphere told a different story. Most delegates avoided eye contact with the humans. Some whispered behind their hands. A few looked openly pleased, as if they were waiting for a moment they had planned for a long time. Human diplomats noticed this, but said nothing. They took their seats and watched as the Senate chair prepared to speak. For months, Earth had been accused of breaking interstellar agreements. The accusations were complicated, full of technical terms and political twists. But Earth had proved its innocence multiple times. Their data was clear. Their experts were calm and precise. Their allies supported them. Even neutral observers admitted Earth's reports made more sense than the Senate's claims. Yet none of it seemed to matter. The chair's voice echoed through the hall, calm but distant. He started talking about maintaining order, protecting stability, and preventing future risks. Humans listened closely. They knew these phrases. They were warning sign signals that a decision had already been made behind closed doors. When the chair announced the final vote, the hall grew silent. The Senate ruled against Earth. The decision passed by a wide majority. The sanctions were strict and unfair. They restricted Earth's trade lanes, limited their diplomatic rights, and suspended their access to several key resources. Some delegates even suggested removing humans from important committees. For a moment, nothing moved. The humans sat still, absorbing the shock. They had prepared themselves for many outcomes, but a ruling this severe, this careless, felt unreal. It was like watching a slow-motion accident they couldn't stop. A soft hum spread across the hall as species whispered to one another. Some looked satisfied, as though they believed they had just protected the galaxy from a future threat. Others looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. Only a few seemed openly regretful, but they did not speak up. One of the human diplomats finally stood. His voice was steady, almost too steady, like someone trying to control a deep wave inside. He thanked the Senate for listening, even though they clearly hadn't. He repeated Earth's promise to avoid conflict. He reminded them that humanity had always stood beside the Senate in times of crisis. But the chair simply nodded and moved on, as if the human delegation were nothing more than a scheduled speech to be dismissed. The humans exchanged glances. They understood. They signed the final documents quietly. No raised voices. No dramatic arguments. No pleas. And then they turned and walked away from the two. Center of the hall dot, this small action carried a weight that many failed to notice. But a few species felt a shiver run through them. They had watched humans long enough to recognize something unusual. There was a difference between a defeated walk and a silent one. The humans were not defeated. They were simply withdrawing. A small group of young delegates whispered nervously, "Why are they so calm? They should be angry. They just lost everything? Why aren't they saying more?" An older delegate, one who had lived long enough to see history repeat itself, shook his head. "They are thinking. That is what worries me." The humans exited the hall and stepped into a wide corridor filled with bright lights and gentle artificial air. The moment the doors closed behind them, the noise from inside faded away. For the first time in hours, they felt space to breathe. One of them spoke softly. They didn't even try to understand. Another answered. They had already made their decision before we arrived. No one disagreed. The group walked together through the long corridors that spiraled around the Senate building. Outside, through the transparent walls, they could see ships moving across the sky, small transports, diplomatic vessels, and elegant cruisers from different civilizations. In the distance, Earth's own transport glowed like a tiny silver dot waiting for its crew to return. The humans paused for a moment and looked at the skyline. The view was peaceful, almost too peaceful. It felt strange to stand on a world that welcomed millions, yet had just pushed away the one species that had helped build much of the galaxy's shared systems. As they walked toward their exit platform, the youngest among them finally asked, "What happens now?" For a few seconds, no one answered. Then the oldest diplomat placed a hand on the railing and looked out at the stars. "Earth will respond," he said quietly. "Not with threats, not with anger, but with action." The younger diplomat frowned. "What kind of action?" "The kind that comes after silence." The group boarded their shuttle. The door closed. The engines hummed softly, rising with a controlled grace. From the outside, it looked like any other departure. But inside, the mood was completely different from the calm surface the Senate had seen. The humans began sending secure messages to Earth, coded in a way only their systems understood. They informed their leaders of the Senate's vote, the tone of the delegates, and the complete dismissal of Earth's evidence. They reported how some species reacted, which ones seemed pleased, and which ones seemed nervous. Every detail mattered now. As the shuttle left the atmosphere, the Senate's capital world grew smaller behind them. The blue seas, the bright city lights, and the spinning towers faded into the distance. For years, Earth had treated this place as a sign of unity and cooperation. But today, it felt like they were leaving behind something that had already started to crumble. Inside the shuttle, no one spoke for a long while. They stared out the window, each lost in thought. One diplomat finally sighed. "They think we will accept this quietly." Another shook his head. "They think we need them." "They don't understand," someone added softly. The oldest looked up. "No, they don't." The shuttle reached Earth's fleet cruiser, a large, elegant vessel with smooth metal panels, glowing lines, and engines that hummed with deep power. When the humans stepped aboard, they were greeted by their crew. The atmosphere inside felt heavier, more secure, more aware. The captain approached and saluted them. "Is it done?" "It's done," the diplomat answered. The captain nodded once. "Then Earth will begin preparations." There was no anger in his voice, just quiet certainty. As the cruiser prepared for departure, the humans gathered in a small conference room. A holographic display lit up with star maps, political charts, and communication logs. They reviewed everything with calm professionalism. The decision had been unfair. The vote had been a mistake. But humans had built their history on rising from mistakes made by others. One of the diplomats leaned back in his chair. "They will realize what they've done." "Yes," another replied. "But not today." The ship's engines activated, sending a gentle vibration through the floor. The stars outside stretched into long lines as the cruiser jumped into faster-than-light travel, heading back to Earth. Inside the conference room, the humans looked at one another with a shared understanding. The Senate thought the ruling was final. The Senate thought their vote would weaken. Earth, the Senate thought humans would stay. Quiet, but the truth was simple. This vote was the moment. The galaxy would someday call their last blunder. Earth had always been careful. For centuries, humans had learned to navigate the galaxy with respect, patience, and caution. They had traded knowledge, shared technology, and helped maintain peace in sectors that spanned light years. But the Senate's vote had changed everything. It was not just an insult. It was a challenge. And humans were not a species that ignored challenges. As the fleet cruisers carried the diplomats back home, Earth's leaders began reviewing every alliance, every agreement, and every obligation the planet had made. They did not panic. There was no shouting, no finger-pointing, no desperate measures. Instead, the world's top minds gathered in secure command centers, speaking calmly but urgently. "We need to understand the impact," one strategist said. "The sanctions are broad, but they can't stop us from preparing. They've made a mistake in thinking this is the end." A technician nodded, pointing at a holographic map of galactic trade routes. "Some routes will be affected, yes, but we control much of the logistics in these sectors. We have enough resources to redirect supply lines and maintain stability." The Senate underestimated how intertwined humanity is with the galaxy. The human delegation had returned from the Senate with detailed reports. Every reaction, every whispered comment, every piece of dismissed evidence was recorded and analyzed. They discovered something crucial. While the Senate thought humans were weak without diplomatic recognition, humans were stronger than many realized. Quietly, systematically, Earth's leaders began activating contingency plans that had been in development for decades. Plans that no one outside the highest ranks had seen. Meanwhile, other species in the galaxy began noticing subtle changes. Supply chains they had taken for granted started slowing down. Resources arrived later than expected. Transport ships encountered unexpected delays. Some smaller colonies reported that humans had withdrawn certain services they had always provided freely. At first, many assumed Earth had been overwhelmed or affected by the Senate sanctions. They were wrong. Back on Earth, engineers and pilots worked with calm efficiency. Communication networks were optimized. Defense systems were checked and upgraded. Technology that had been quietly developed for decades now became operational across key colonies. Humans did not broadcast their preparations. They did not send messages boasting of strength or anger. They simply acted quietly and decisively. One of the younger officers in a command center asked, "Why are we doing all this quietly? Shouldn't the Senate know how strong we are?" An older leader smiled, shaking his head. "Let them think what they want. Our strength is in our action, not in our words. When the time comes, they will understand. And by then, it will be too late to regret it." Across the galaxy, the Senate and its allies continued their usual routines, confident that Earth was weakened. They assumed the sanctions would force humans into negotiation, perhaps even compliance. They did not notice how quickly Earth adapted, how efficiently the planet reorganized itself to bypass every restriction in the weeks following the vote. The first signs of Earth's quiet response began to appear. Trade routes that had been interrupted were rerouted, often more efficiently than before. Communications that were blocked by the Senate's restrictions found alternative channels. Humans had always been resourceful, and now that resourcefulness became a subtle but unmistakable demonstration of power. Some smaller species started noticing patterns. Ships that previously carried supplies now carried engineers, technicians, and advanced machinery. Some colonies reported an increase in human protection forces. No aggressive action was taken, but the presence of humans reminded everyone that Earth was far from powerless. Human scientists continued to develop new technologies at an accelerated pace. They shared some innovations quietly with colonies that had proven trustworthy, ensuring that those regions remained stable despite the Senate's sanctions. By acting strategically, humans increased their influence even without making open declarations. One diplomat reviewing the situation said, "The galaxy thinks Earth is hurt. They think we have retreated. But look at the reports. We are stronger than ever. We are everywhere the Senate does not notice." Another added, "They underestimated how quickly humans adapt. They always have." Even in areas of diplomacy, Earth acted carefully. Instead of responding with anger, humans sent neutral communications to key allies and other species, making it clear that Earth's focus remained on peace and order, but only on humanity's terms. This subtle approach confused many observers. Some thought humans were passive, while others began questioning whether the Senate had truly understood the consequences of their vote. As Earth's influence grew quietly, the Senate started to feel a ripple of unease. Requests that once had immediate responses from human representatives now took longer, or were redirected entirely. Colonies that had relied on human knowledge began solving problems independently. Some even started surpassing expectations, all guided by human oversight from afar. Inside Earth's secure command rooms, leaders discussed the next steps. "We must ensure our colonies are secure," one said. "We must maintain our networks, strengthen our communication, and continue supporting those who rely on us. This is not retaliation. This is preparation." Another added, "And we must be ready to act if the Senate miscalculates further. But we act only when necessary. The galaxy will see that humanity's strength is measured, precise, and undeniable." Outside Earth, in distant parts of the galaxy, small suspicions began to grow. Some Senate officials noticed unusual patterns, delays that did not make sense, colonies that seemed more organized than expected, and humans quietly taking on roles that the Senate thought were restricted. Rumors spread among smaller species. Whispers of Earth's hidden influence began to circulate. Back on Earth, the people continued their work with calm determination. Citizens were aware of the Senate's vote, but they were not distracted by anger or fear. Life continued, but there was a shared understanding that the galaxy had misjudged humanity. Humans focused on innovation, problem-solving, and supporting each other, demonstrating a unity that had always been Earth's greatest strength. One of the younger engineers asked, "Do you think the Senate will realize what we are doing?" The leader smiled, looking at a map of the stars. "Eventually, they will see, and when they do, they will wish they had chosen differently. But for now, we work quietly." That is how humans have always succeeded. Not by shouting, not by threatening, but by preparing and acting when the time is right. As months passed, Earth's quiet response created stability in regions that had been assumed to be weakened. Other species started seeking human guidance without even knowing it. They called for assistance, advice, and cooperation, often unaware that humans were selectively providing support. Each action reinforced the message that Earth remained strong, capable, and indispensable. The Senate, meanwhile, grew increasingly uneasy. Their vote had seemed simple and decisive, yet Earth continued to operate efficiently. Every assumption they had made about humanity being weakened proved wrong. Some officials started questioning their own strategies, realizing too late that the planet they had tried to punish had only become stronger, more connected, and more influential. One day, a senior Senate observer whispered to a colleague, "We may have underestimated them." The colleague shook their head slowly. "We didn't underestimate them. We ignored them. And that is the real problem." Inside Earth's command centers, humans continued their careful planning. They monitored the galaxy, ensured the safety of their colonies, and refined strategies that would maintain order and security without appearing aggressive. Every move was deliberate, every action measured. They did not boast. They did not threaten. They simply prepared. The galaxy watched, often without realizing it, as Earth quietly became stronger than ever. The Senate's vote, meant to weaken the planet, had only shown humanity's resilience, intelligence, and ability to act decisively. The people of Earth knew one thing clearly. The Senate had made a mistake, but they had also created an opportunity, a chance to demonstrate that humans could rise above challenges quietly and powerfully. By the end of the first year after the vote, the galaxy had begun to notice patterns that could not be ignored. Humans were everywhere the Senate had assumed they were absent. Colonies functioned better, trade was efficient, and communication networks were stronger. No declaration had been made, no fleet had moved aggressively. But the message was clear. Earth would not be controlled, intimidated, or underestimated. And in quiet rooms across the planet, humans looked out at the stars and prepared for the future. They had no intention of revenge. They sought no unnecessary conflict. Their only goal was simple: to ensure that the galaxy recognized Earth's true strength, and that humanity would never again be misjudged. The Senate had thought the vote would weaken Earth. Instead, it had shown the galaxy a lesson they would never forget. Humans, when challenged, did not crumble. They adapted. They prepared. They grew stronger. And they did it all quietly, deliberately, and with a calm precision that left the galaxy watching in awe, without even realizing it at first. Months had passed since the Senate's vote against Earth, and the first subtle signs of consequences began to ripple through the galaxy. Humans had acted quietly, systematically, and with precision. They had not reacted with anger or threats. Instead, they had focused on preparation, organization, and ensuring the stability of every sector connected to them. And now, for the first time, other species began noticing the effect of Earth's actions. Trade routes that had always seemed reliable suddenly faced delays. Ships that transported food, minerals, and technology arrived later than expected. Colonies that had counted on human logistical support found themselves adjusting quickly, sometimes struggling. At first, it appeared to outsiders that Earth was struggling under the sanctions. It looked like humans had lost access to important resources and were withdrawing support. Many speculated that the Senate's vote had worked, but it had not. Human engineers had anticipated these disruptions. The delays were part of a larger plan. Earth had rerouted supply chains, improved their transport systems, and introduced new communication protocols. Colonies continued receiving what they needed, often faster and more efficiently than before. From the outside, it seemed like the galaxy was in chaos. While inside, humans were calm and precise, quietly managing every detail. A young logistics officer in one of Earth's command centers stared at the star maps displayed on the holographic table. "It looks like the Senate's vote caused real problems," he said. "Some of the outer colonies are reporting shortages." An older strategist smiled. "Yes, but those shortages are only temporary, and only for those who didn't plan. Humans have already solved the problem in ways the Senate can't even detect. What they see as chaos is actually us in control. Humans had always been adaptive, and now that adaptability became a weapon. Not a weapon of destruction, but of influence and stability." Colonies that had once relied on Senate support found themselves benefiting from Earth's guidance. They received engineers, new tools, and systems that made life easier. Even without the Senate's approval, humans maintained order, proving that their strength was independent and self-sufficient. Elsewhere, in the Senate chambers, the first signs of worry began to appear. The officials had assumed that Earth's influence would shrink under sanctions. They believed the planet would comply, or at least become weaker. But as reports of continued human efficiency reached them, unease spread. Some delegates whispered to each other, unsure of how to explain the results. "They are managing despite the sanctions," one said. "It doesn't make sense." "They always find a way," another replied. "Humans, they are persistent." The Senate had made a serious error. They thought punishment alone could control a species that had always thrived on adaptability and ingenuity. They had not considered that humans could turn apparent weakness into strength. Back on Earth, leaders reviewed every report from the colonies. They monitored trade, communication, and defense networks, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. Their actions were deliberate. Every adjustment, every intervention, and every solution was measured. They were not trying to show power for power's sake. They were quietly ensuring stability and readiness for the future. A communication officer looked at the data and said, "Our colonies are functioning better than they were before the vote. Some are even reporting improvements in efficiency and security." A senior strategist nodded. "Exactly. That is the point. We prepare quietly, but the effect is obvious. The galaxy thinks we are struggling, but in truth, we are thriving." Humans also began testing the limits of the Senate's sanctions without overtly breaking them. They experimented with alternative routes, tested independent communication channels, and upgraded their transport systems. Each success reinforced the message that humans were not dependent on approval from any other power. They were self-reliant, resourceful, and capable of solving problems that the Senate assumed would overwhelm them. Meanwhile, smaller species began noticing something strange. Colonies that had expected trouble from the sanctions found themselves receiving human assistance without asking. Supplies arrived unexpectedly. Technical teams fixed problems that no one else could solve. Communication delays disappeared as humans optimized networks. The subtle but undeniable pattern emerged. Earth was still in control. One young colony administrator said to a colleague, "I thought we would struggle, but Earth is helping us more than ever." "Yes," the colleague replied. And quietly, "They never make a scene. It's almost shocking how effective they are." These reports eventually reached the Senate's ears. Officials began meeting in emergency sessions, trying to understand how Earth was maintaining order despite sanctions. They could not find a logical explanation. The very systems they thought they had restricted were working perfectly. Every assumption they had made about human weakness proved false. In a private observation room, an experienced delegate admitted, "We thought we had contained them. But somehow, Earth is stronger than we imagined." Another shook their head slowly. "It's not just strength. It's how they think. Everything they do is measured, precise, and effective. We underestimated them." On Earth, no one celebrated the Senate's growing unease. They continued to work, quietly managing logistics, communications, and security. Every colony under their influence became more efficient. Trade routes stabilized, resources flowed smoothly, and networks functioned at peak performance. Humans demonstrated that their power did not come from force, but from intelligence, planning, and cooperation. One officer looked at the maps and smiled. "We don't need to threaten anyone. They will see our capability without a single aggressive action." "Yes," said the strategist next to him. "The galaxy is already noticing. Soon, everyone will realize that the Senate's vote didn't weaken Earth. It only showed how adaptable and capable we are." Humans had always believed that true strength was not loud or aggressive. It was measured, deliberate, and precise. They had learned that lesson over centuries, surviving natural disasters, political upheavals, and technological challenges. Now, the Senate had unintentionally demonstrated that lesson to the entire galaxy. As the months went by, patterns became undeniable. Colonies that had been isolated or dependent now thrived with Earth's guidance. Trade routes that were assumed disrupted ran smoothly. Communications that were thought blocked operated efficiently. The Senate's sanctions had no visible effect on Earth's operational capacity. Even without a public announcement, the galaxy began to realize that humans had turned a supposed disadvantage into a subtle form of influence. No one could openly challenge them, yet everyone relied on them. It was an influence the Senate could not control or stop. Inside Earth's command centers, humans reviewed progress carefully. Every successful adjustment, every efficient operation, and every stable colony reinforced their confidence. They knew that the Senate would eventually recognize their mistake. They also knew that by preparing quietly and deliberately, they had ensured that when the time came, Earth would have the power and influence to act decisively, but not aggressively. One young analyst asked, "Do you think the Senate understands yet?" The senior strategist shook their head. "Not yet. They see results, but they do not understand the methods. They assume we are struggling, while in reality, we are in control. That will be their greatest shock when they finally realize it." By the end of the year, the first real signs of the Senate's panic began to show. Delegates started questioning each other's decisions. Committees scrambled to fix perceived problems. Some tried to rebuild alliances with colonies, not understanding that those colonies now trusted Earth more than the Senate. The vote that had been intended to punish humans had created an entirely new reality, a galaxy dependent on Earth's quiet guidance and competence. On Earth, the leaders continued to plan carefully. They strengthened communication channels, monitored every sector, and ensured that colonies remained stable. Their actions were deliberate, never rushed, and never visible to outsiders unless someone knew where to look. A logistics officer commented, "It's almost poetic." The Senate tried to weaken us, but they ended up relying on us more than ever. "Yes," replied the strategist. "And the best part is that they do not realize it yet. They will only see the consequences later, when it is undeniable." Humans had always thrived under pressure, and the Senate's vote had been the ultimate test. But instead of breaking them, it had strengthened their networks, sharpened their focus, and enhanced their ability to influence the galaxy quietly. Earth had turned a political setback into an unprecedented demonstration of capability. By the end of Part 3, the galaxy could see that the first consequences of the Senate's vote were not chaos or anger, but subtle and undeniable influence. Earth had adapted, guided its colonies, maintained stability, and quietly proved that the Senate had underestimated the most important force in the galaxy, humans themselves. The Senate had not expected things to unfold like this. Weeks had turned into months since their vote against Earth, and instead of the planet being weakened, it had quietly grown stronger. Officials in the chambers were growing restless. They had thought sanctions would force humans to comply, or at least slow them down. Instead, they were watching as Earth's colonies thrived. Trade routes functioned efficiently, and communications flowed uninterrupted. Inside the Senate, debates were becoming heated. Delegates pointed fingers at each other. "We thought the sanctions would pressure Earth." One said, "They are still operating at full strength. Why didn't anyone foresee this?" "They underestimated humanity's resilience," another replied. "And now it is becoming a problem for us." Committees tried to pass new resolutions, hoping to regain control. Some suggested harsher sanctions. Others proposed restrictions on communications and trade. Every proposal was met with endless debate. Each time the Senate tried to act decisively, it failed. Earth seemed always one step ahead, maintaining stability without confrontation. The human response was simple: patience. Earth did not react publicly to the Senate's panic. No speeches were broadcast. No fleets were sent as a threat. Instead, humans quietly strengthened their systems, expanded their communication networks, and ensured every colony was secure. Every action reinforced one undeniable truth: humans could handle challenges without chaos, without drama, and without the need for approval. On one of the outer colonies, a young administrator looked at a report and smiled. "We were worried about shortages," he said to his assistant, "but everything has been restored and even improved. Earth's coordination is remarkable." The assistant nodded. "I don't think the Senate realizes how much we depend on them. Even after their vote against Earth, they think we are struggling. But humans have ensured everything continues smoothly." Back in the Senate, officials began noticing patterns that made them uneasy. They realized that even as they tried to enforce sanctions, Earth remained in control. Trade networks adjusted seamlessly. Communication delays were solved before they caused problems. Colonies reported stability despite restrictions. It became clear that the planet had anticipated every possible obstacle and had systems in place to overcome them. One senator whispered nervously to a colleague, "It's as if they are 2 steps ahead of us at all times." "How is that possible?" The colleague shook their head. "Humans are patient. They don't rush. They act deliberately. That is why we cannot predict them. That is why we feel powerless, even when we think we control the situation." Meanwhile, back on Earth, leaders continued their work calmly. They held meetings in secure command centers, reviewing progress and planning next steps. No one was celebrating the Senate's panic. Instead, everyone focused on preparation. Every adjustment to trade, communication, and security was deliberate. Every colony, every fleet, and every system was carefully coordinated. A young strategist asked, "Should we make a public statement?" "Some colonies are asking for guidance." The senior leader shook their head. "Not yet. Let them wonder. Our influence is stronger when it is subtle. The galaxy already sees the results. They don't need words. They need outcomes." The results were clear. Colonies that were expected to struggle were thriving. Systems that were assumed to fail were functioning perfectly. Even the most remote areas were stable. Human influence had grown quietly, almost invisibly, and the Senate had no idea how to respond. Some smaller species began noticing anomalies as well. They realized that they were relying on Earth more than they realized. Requests for assistance that had once been urgent were now handled efficiently and quietly. Problems that should have caused delays or disputes were solved with calm precision. Even without realizing it, the galaxy was increasingly dependent on humans. In one distant council chamber, delegates were discussing the situation. "The sanctions should have weakened them," one said. "Instead, they are everywhere. Our colonies are thriving under Earth's guidance. We are losing influence, and we don't even know it." Another nodded grimly. "They have turned our vote into their advantage. Every problem we thought we caused is now an opportunity for them. We cannot ignore this any longer." Back on Earth, humans were not acting out of revenge or pride. They were focused on efficiency, stability, and preparation. Engineers upgraded systems quietly. Pilots trained without announcement. Colonies received technical support in ways that seemed ordinary, but were actually part of a larger strategy. Humans understood that true influence came not from loud actions, but from steady, consistent results. A young technician watched a holographic map showing multiple colonies and transport routes. "Everything is running perfectly," they said. "Even the colonies we thought might struggle are handling the new systems well." The senior strategist smiled. "That is the point. We don't need to show our power. We only need to ensure that everything works as it should. The Senate and others will notice soon enough." As the weeks went by, the Senate's attempts to regain control became more frantic. They tried sending envoys to colonies, hoping to reassert influence. But the colonies were already confident in their own operations. Guided quietly by Earth, delegates realized too late that the planet they had tried to punish had become indispensable to the functioning of the galaxy. In one council room, a senator whispered, "We thought we could isolate them. We thought we could weaken them. But now, it seems they are everywhere we are, and stronger than ever." The colleague nodded slowly. "They don't need our approval. They don't need our help. And they don't need to fight. That is what makes them so dangerous." Meanwhile, Earth continued to plan carefully. Every colony, every trade route, every communication network was part of a larger system of stability and preparation. Humans were not trying to show off or intimidate. They were simply ensuring that no challenge, no matter how unexpected, could disrupt their influence or their way of life. A young officer asked, "Will the Senate ever realize what we're doing?" The senior leader looked at the map of the galaxy. "Eventually, they will see the results. They will understand that their vote did not weaken Earth. It strengthened us. But by then, it will be too late to reverse the consequences. In the meantime, the galaxy was quietly shifting. Colonies that had been hesitant now relied on Earth for guidance. Trade networks ran more smoothly than ever. Communication systems were faster, more reliable, and more efficient. Even species that had doubted humanity began to notice a quiet, but undeniable influence. The Senate's attempts to control the situation only highlighted the human skill. Every action they took, every new proposal they made, was countered not with confrontation, but with efficiency, stability, and quiet influence. Humans demonstrated that power did not always need to be loud or aggressive. True strength was preparation, consistency, and the ability to act decisively when needed. As months passed, the Senate's panic grew. Delegates no longer argued about sanctions. They debated how to adapt to a galaxy increasingly guided by Earth's influence. Every assumption they had made about human weakness proved false. Every strategy they had relied on failed to account for humans' adaptability, patience, and intelligence. Back on Earth, humans continued their work with calm determination. Engineers, pilots, strategists, and diplomats worked together seamlessly. Every colony was stable, every fleet was ready, and every system functioned at peak efficiency. Humans did not need to shout or threaten. Their actions spoke for them. One young analyst remarked, "It's amazing how quietly they've gained influence. The Senate thinks they control the situation, but in reality, we are guiding the galaxy without anyone noticing." The senior strategist nodded. "Exactly. That is the advantage of humans. We do not rush. We do not act without reason. We prepare, we observe, and we act when the time is right. That is why we are respected, and that is why the Senate's vote was their greatest mistake." By the end of this period, the first real consequences of the Senate's panic were clear. Earth had not been weakened. Instead, it had grown stronger. Colonies functioned efficiently, trade networks operated smoothly, and communications flowed without interruption. Humans had turned a political setback into a demonstration of resilience, intelligence, and quiet influence. The galaxy, whether it realized it or not, had begun to depend on Earth more than ever. And the Senate, once confident in their decision, now found themselves uncertain, unprepared, and increasingly aware that humans had quietly turned the tables. Earth's influence was no longer about approval or recognition. It was about action, preparation, and consistent results. The Senate had assumed power could be measured by control, but humans had shown that true strength lay in the ability to act calmly, decisively, and without unnecessary display. And as the stars continued to shine over every colony, humans continued their quiet work, knowing that the galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would not forget. Earth had been quiet for months. Its people had not reacted with anger or threats after the Senate's vote against them. Instead, they had worked calmly and efficiently, quietly strengthening their colonies, trade networks, and communication systems. By now, the galaxy was beginning to notice that something unusual was happening. Humans were everywhere, quietly supporting stability, solving problems, and keeping everything running smoothly. Yet they had made no public declaration. Inside Earth's command centers, leaders gathered to review the progress. Every report from colonies, every message from trade networks, and every observation from distant sectors was analyzed carefully. Humans were patient. They knew that influence was stronger when it was earned, not announced. They had waited for the right moment to make their position clear. A young officer asked, "When will we let the galaxy know what we've done? People are starting to wonder about our silence." The senior strategist looked up from the holographic star map and said, "Soon, the galaxy sees the results. They feel the influence, but they do not yet understand the method. When the message is clear, It will not be in words. It will be in undeniable action. Humans had always believed that results mattered more than declarations. They had learned this lesson through centuries of challenges, from natural disasters to political disputes. And now, the galaxy was about to see the consequence of those lessons applied on a massive scale. Outside Earth, the Senate was growing increasingly nervous. Delegates had assumed that sanctions and votes could weaken humans. Instead, colonies continued to thrive, trade networks remained stable, and communications flowed without interruption. Officials began sending envoys to distant sectors, hoping to regain influence. But they found that humans had quietly taken responsibility for stability, guiding operations in ways that were efficient, reliable, and nearly invisible. One senator whispered to a colleague, "We thought we were in control, but we're not. Everywhere we try to act, humans have already solved the problem." The colleague frowned. "It's more than that. They don't just solve problems. They prevent them. And they do it quietly, without anyone realizing it. It's unsettling." Back on Earth, the leaders continued their preparations. They were not interested in confrontation, and they did not seek revenge. Their goal was simple: ensure that the galaxy understood, clearly and without question, that humans were capable, independent, and essential to the stability of interstellar civilization. A communications officer noted, "The Senate is starting to notice patterns. Some colonies report being guided by Earth without realizing it. Our quiet influence is spreading." "Exactly," said the senior strategist. "We do not need to announce ourselves yet. The results will speak louder than any declaration. Humans have always been strongest when others underestimate them." As the months passed, Earth prepared a carefully planned message for the galaxy. It would not be a threat. It would not be angry or emotional. It would be calm, factual, and undeniable. The message would outline the consequences of the Senate's vote, present the evidence the Senate had ignored, and demonstrate humanity's capability. It was a message designed not to provoke, but to clarify, educate, and assert Earth's rightful influence. In a large, secure broadcast chamber, humans worked on the final preparations. Holographic screens displayed colonies, fleets, and trade networks. Every line of communication was tested. Every detail was checked. Nothing was left to chance. A young analyst asked, "Do we really need to broadcast everything? Couldn't we just let them figure it out?" The senior strategist shook his head. "The galaxy needs to understand the truth. Silence has served us well to prepare and influence quietly. But now, the time has come to speak not with anger, but with clarity. Facts, evidence, and reason will speak louder than threats ever could." When the broadcast was finally ready, it was sent simultaneously to every corner of human-influenced space. The message was calm, factual, and direct. Humans outlined the events that led to the Senate's vote, presented the evidence the Senate had ignored, and described the capabilities of Earth and its colonies. It was a message designed to inform, not intimidate, yet its impact was immediate. Across the galaxy, delegates, observers, and colony administrators stopped what they were doing. They watched the broadcast, listened carefully, and realized the truth. Humans had not been weakened. Instead, they had quietly strengthened their position, ensured stability, and guided operations that were critical to the functioning of the galaxy. The evidence was undeniable, one observer said. "They have prepared for everything. They have maintained order, solved problems, and ensured stability without ever appearing to act." "This is remarkable." A senator muttered to a colleague, "We thought we punished them, but they have only become stronger. We underestimated them completely." The broadcast ended with a calm statement from Earth's representatives. "You wished to see our limits. You are about to learn why civilizations that underestimate humanity often regret it. We do not act without reason. We act with preparation, foresight, and the aim of stability. The galaxy has relied on us in ways that many do not yet understand. We hope this message clarifies that reliance and that the value of humanity is recognized clearly. The effect was immediate. Across colonies and sectors, humans received messages of support and acknowledgement. Species that had doubted humanity now began to recognize their capabilities. Even the Senate, which had once thought it could control Earth, was forced to acknowledge the reality. Humans were not only resilient, they were indispensable. Back on Earth, leaders did not celebrate with fanfare. They had anticipated the effect. Instead, they returned to work, monitoring colonies, adjusting systems, and ensuring that everything continued to operate efficiently. The message had been sent. The galaxy had seen the results. And humans had proven their point without anger, without threats, and without unnecessary conflict. A young officer commented, "The galaxy understands now. Everyone can see how capable we are." A senior strategist nodded. Yes, they see the results. But more importantly, they feel the impact. Influence does not need to be loud. It only needs to be effective. The Senate scrambled to respond. Delegates debated new policies, attempted to regain influence, and sought clarification from colonies. Every action was slowed by humans' quiet efficiency. The vote that had been intended to punish Earth had backfired completely. Instead of weakening humans, it had revealed their capability, their foresight, and their unmatched ability to act calmly under pressure. One senator admitted in a private meeting, "We tried to limit them, but we cannot. They are everywhere, influencing without confrontation. They are stronger than we imagined." The colleagues sighed. "We created the problem ourselves. Our vote was a mistake. Their strength was always there. We just forced them to show it." Meanwhile, humans continued their work quietly. Every colony remained stable, every fleet ready, and every network functioning. No threat was issued. No aggression was displayed. Yet the message was unmistakable. Humans had prepared, adapted, and acted with precision. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now the truth was clear. A communications officer smiled as they observed responses from multiple sectors. "They understand now. They finally understand." "Yes," said the strategist, "and they will remember it." The Senate's vote was their last miscalculation. Humans do not act recklessly. We do not rely on threats. But when we act, it is deliberate, effective, and undeniable. The galaxy has learned that lesson now. By the end of Part 5, the galaxy had witnessed humanity's quiet power. Earth had acted not with anger, but with precision. It had corrected the perception of weakness, ensured stability, and made its influence undeniable. The Senate's misjudgment had created an opportunity for humans to demonstrate their capability, foresight, and quiet dominance in interstellar affairs. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had spoken clearly without a word of aggression. They had proven that true strength lies not in noise, threats, or anger, but in preparation, calm action, and results that could not be ignored. Months had passed since Earth had sent its quiet, undeniable message to the galaxy. The Senate's vote, once intended to punish humans, had turned into a lesson that no one could ignore. The planet had not reacted with anger, threats, or aggression. Instead, humans had acted calmly, prepared carefully, and quietly ensured that every colony, trade route, and communication system continued to function perfectly. Now, the full impact of their actions was beginning to settle across the stars. On Earth, leaders gathered in their command centers. There was no celebration, no fanfare. Humans did not need applause or recognition. They focused on monitoring the galaxy, ensuring that their colonies remained stable, and continuing to prepare for whatever the future might bring. Every action, every decision was deliberate. They understood that influence was not about visibility. It was about results. Young strategists looked at the holographic star map showing every colony and fleet. The galaxy has responded, they said. Colonies are stabilizing faster than expected. Even some species that doubted us are seeking our guidance. The senior strategist nodded. Yes, that is the effect of preparation, consistency, and calm action. Humans do not need to shout to be heard. The galaxy already feels our influence. The Senate, on the other hand, was growing anxious. Delegates who had once been confident now questioned every decision. They had assumed that the sanctions and the vote against Earth would weaken the planet. They had expected humans to comply or at least slow down. Instead, they watched helplessly as Earth quietly strengthened its influence, guided its colonies, and ensured stability across multiple sectors. In one chamber. A senator whispered nervously to a colleague, "We thought we could control them. We thought we could force compliance. But everywhere we try to act, humans have already solved the problem." The colleagues shook their heads slowly. "It's worse than that. They don't just solve problems, they prevent them. And they do it quietly. We underestimated them completely, and it is becoming obvious." Humans, however, remained calm. They did not seek to punish the Senate or any species. They acted with precision and foresight, guided by a simple principle: preparation and stability were stronger than anger or threats. Colonies that had been expected to struggle now thrived. Trade routes that should have been disrupted ran smoothly. Communications that were assumed blocked operated perfectly. The galaxy was slowly realizing that Earth had turned a political setback into a demonstration of quiet, undeniable power. Inside Earth's command centers, leaders continued to plan carefully. They reviewed reports, adjusted systems, and monitored every colony. Every decision was calculated. Every action reinforced one undeniable truth: humans were resilient, resourceful, and capable of maintaining stability even when others tried to undermine them. A young officer asked, "When will the Senate finally understand?" The senior strategist smiled. "Eventually. They will see the results clearly. They will realize that their vote against Earth was not just a mistake, it was their last miscalculation. But by the time they understand, the galaxy will already recognize our influence." Humans also focused on long-term strategies. They invested in education, technology, and communication networks. Colonies were strengthened, fleets were upgraded, and new systems were put in place. Every effort was deliberate and coordinated. Humans knew that true strength lay not in aggression, but in preparation, reliability, and foresight. As the months continued, the galaxy began to shift subtly. Species that had once doubted humans started depending on Earth for guidance. Trade networks that had been disrupted stabilized under human oversight. Communications that had been unreliable now flowed smoothly. Even the most remote colonies were more efficient, better connected, and safer than before. The galaxy was beginning to feel the full effect of human planning and influence. The Senate grew increasingly uneasy. They tried to enforce new restrictions, impose stricter rules, and regain control. But every attempt was countered by Earth's quiet efficiency. Problems that should have created conflict were resolved calmly and strategically. Humans did not respond with anger. They responded with solutions. In a private chamber, a senior senator admitted, "We underestimated them. We thought sanctions and votes could weaken them, but they are everywhere, solving problems we didn't even know existed. We are losing influence, and it is all because we failed to understand their strength." The colleague nodded gravely. "We created this ourselves. Our vote was meant to punish them, but instead it demonstrated their capability. They are not loud or aggressive, yet they are stronger than we imagined." On Earth, leaders observed these reactions, but did not celebrate. Their focus remained on preparation, stability, and planning. They continued to coordinate colonies, optimize trade routes, and monitor communication networks. Humans understood that influence was strongest when it was earned through consistent action, not announcements or threats. A young analyst said, "The galaxy is starting to notice. Species that doubted us are now acknowledging our guidance, even if they do not fully understand it." The senior strategist replied, "Exactly. Influence does not need to be loud. It only needs to be effective. And humans have mastered that principle." The Senate's vote showed the galaxy our resilience and capability. That lesson will not be forgotten. As time passed, the full consequences of the Senate's misjudgment became clear. Humans had not been weakened, they had grown stronger. Colonies were thriving, trade networks were efficient, and communications flowed seamlessly. Earth had quietly ensured stability across multiple sectors. And the galaxy was starting to realize the truth. Humans were not only resilient, they were indispensable. Even species that had once doubted humans now sought guidance. Requests for assistance increased, not because humans demanded it, but because their consistent, quiet influence had earned trust. The galaxy depended on Earth more than it realized, and the Senate had no choice but to acknowledge the reality. Inside Earth's command centers, leaders continued their work. Every system, every fleet, every colony remained coordinated and efficient. Humans had demonstrated that true power was not measured by threats or aggression, but by preparation, foresight, and calm action. A young officer commented, "They finally understand, don't they? The galaxy can see our influence now." The senior strategist smiled. "Yes, they see it, but more importantly, they feel it. Humans have acted without conflict, without threats, and without unnecessary drama. That is why our influence is undeniable. The Senate's vote was their last mistake. They underestimated us, and now the galaxy knows why that was a miscalculation." As months turned into years, humans continued to strengthen their position quietly. Every colony became more efficient, every trade network more reliable, and every communication system more advanced. The galaxy could see the results, even if the Senate struggled to accept them. Earth's influence was everywhere, yet it remained calm and deliberate. Humans had proven that challenges could be met with preparation and intelligence, not anger or threats. They had turned a political setback into a demonstration of quiet power and enduring influence. The Senate's vote had been intended to punish, but it had instead revealed the true strength of humanity. By the end of this period, the galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget. Humans do not need to shout to be heard. They do not need to threaten to be respected. Their power lies in preparation, consistency, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. The Senate had misjudged them, and the consequences were now clear for all to see. Earth had not only survived the Senate's vote, it had grown stronger because of it. Colonies thrived, trade routes remained efficient, and communications flowed seamlessly. Humans had proven that resilience, intelligence, and quiet action were the most effective forms of influence. The galaxy had been taught a lesson, and the Senate had no choice but to accept it. Humans continued their work calmly, knowing that the galaxy now understood the truth. They had shown that power does not require noise, threats, or aggression. True strength lies in preparation, foresight, and action that produces results. The Senate's last blunder had become humanity's greatest demonstration of capability, and the galaxy would never forget it.